Give me that.
Think you might have tossed it a little too far?
He doesn't know the meaning of restraint.
Kiss my ass.
Salutes! It's your boy Eugen Psycho, aka Sniper98. It's been a hot minute since I last started off a video like that, huh? Didn't expect me to actually upload another how-to so fast now, did ya? What can I say? My YouTube revenue ain't gonna shill itself. Not that I'll see the fucking money from this video until at least another month or two from now. We're taking a break from the 4 stars. I think 3 in a row is good enough for now. So for those of you who want another 4-star how-to, see you in about 6 months from now. Shinmen Musashi no Kami Fujiwara no Harunobu
Clan Bard push Gwingis go get a Quindrobble, Clan Cecilio go.
is a 5-star saber who debuted 3/4 of a year early as part of NAFGO's 2019 New Year's banner, and she properly shows up as a story-relevant character starting with Shimosa. She's a burst damage saber with a unique mechanic that sets her a bit more apart than other DPS sabers, and was the servant who introduced us to the good old Overkill Bug, which I've already explained in my hidden mechanics video, but I'll take the time to explain it here, again, once we get to that. And a quick PSA for all prepubescent and teenage boys watching this video right now whose ages are between 10 and 17, be advised that Miyamoto Musashi is a known avid enthusiast of younger men. So if you do not want to be 2080 Ti'd for the rest of your life, or at least until you're 18, please avoid summoning the samurai pedophile at all costs. Or if you don't mind that because you want a free 2080 Ti, or because you now have a big sister complex because of Azure Lane, go ahead and summon her, doesn't matter to me. And by that, I mean good fucking luck on Saber GSSRs from now on, because she ain't got a proper rate up anymore, at least not from what I can tell. Or just save your quartz until Zerk Sushi shows up. Cow Sushi is a primary DPS saber who's got a gorilla deck with triple buster cards and a buster MP for maximum red button abuse. Now you know why the staples easy button is red. Her stats are pretty indicative of her role as main DPS, being a high 12k attack and low 13.6k HP SSR. Her MP generation rate is 0.87%, which by itself is above average, but with her Berserker deck, she isn't going to be putting that MP generation stat to much use, at least not theoretically. This is something that I haven't talked about in a while, and that's Musashi's command card hit counts. Her Buster cards hit twice, her arts and quick cards hit 3 times each, and her extra attack hits 4 times. This will be important once we start talking about her first skill in just a little bit. And by in a little bit, I actually mean right the fuck now. Yotsuba's first skill doubles the number of hits that all of her face cards have, including her extra attack, reduces the damage of each individual hit by 50% to compensate, but also increases her damage by 0 to 30%, all for 1 turn on an 8 to 6 turn cooldown. This skill is a unique skill, as in there is no other skill in the game that alters the actual hit counts of a servant's face cards, and for a very good reason, because the skill is borderline broken. And yes, I didn't include Zerk Sushi's second skill because that shit is even more broken! In order to begin explaining why this skill is broken, we have to look at one of the most integral mechanics of FGO gameplay, a phase card's hit count. While to most people hit count doesn't really mean all that much, for those of you who follow this channel, or for those of you who actually do pay attention to the game that you're playing, unlike the majority of the player base who treat this as nothing more than a waifu or husbando simulator, you'll know that hit counts are actually very pivotal to a servant's gameplay. Hit counts are the single most important factor of a servant's face card because the number of times a face card hits determines 2 other very important mechanics, which are how much MP charge that face card generates if it can, and how many stars it produces, again, if it can. When a servant uses an arts or quick card, you'll notice that their MP gauge fills up per individual hit, and the same applies when they're producing stars. As a matter of fact, hit count is arguably more important when it comes to star gen because while the game doesn't arbitrarily cap the amount of MP charge a servant can get depending on their buffs, for star gen it actually does. The game caps the maximum number of stars that any single hit of any servant's face card can produce at 3. No matter how many buffs you give them. This is because the rational max of stars you'll ever need in any given turn is 50, so if that cap didn't exist, it'd be a little too easy to hit max 50 stars, and Sally's boyfriend would be out of a job. So in the case of star generating servants, as far as regular old face cards are concerned, this means that the higher their hit count, the better they'll be able to generate stars overall, and this explains why Jack is widely considered to be the best at it, because she's an assassin with the highest rank of presence concealment as her passive, and has a full assassin deck with 5-hit quick cards and a solid 4-hit extra. Now let's backtrack to Musashi and her S1. DW decided to fuck with one of FGO's most integral mechanics, just like how Ubisoft decided to fuck with your phones in Siege with Dokebi, and this is what happened. With her S1 active, her busters now hit 4 times, her arts and quick cards both hit 6 times, and her extra, which also counts, hits a colossal 8 times. In essence, this means that Musashi just straight up has double MP generation because you're directly doubling her hit counts. Or, if it were listed as a skill effect, you might as well say that Musashi buffs her own MP gen by 100% for 1 turn. And of course, that's only half the story. It also means that Musashi should have double star gen for that turn as well. At least in theory, practically speaking, she doesn't actually generate exactly double because of the way the game calculates star gen. Still, this is all before the game starts taking any other buffs that she might also have into account, and we didn't even mention the fact that the skill also just straight up increases her face card and extra attack damage by up to 30% too. This gives Musashi insane boosts to her Brave Chain options. She can use it to supercharge her MP, become an emergency star gen, or simply do more damage. Naturally, since the most reliable way to have Musashi use Brave Chains is to make her fight by herself, this skill is huge for sushi solos. But obviously it's also super powerful for Musashi when she's backed up by a team properly supporting her. Just wait for one of Musashi's Brave Chains to come up and let it rip if the time's right. Just a friendly reminder though, that the skill does not work with her MP, since her skill specifically says that it only works when she's normal attacking, which is referring to her face cards and extra attack. So her MP isn't going to be hitting twice as much or get the damage buff from her S1. If possible, then reserve it for her face card only Brave Chains in order to get the most bang for your buck. And lastly, the damage buff on her S1 is not your standard charisma type buff. It's a special damage mod, so it falls under the same category as an MP damage buff or a crit damage buff, making it stack very well with standard team buffs or her own S2. The only reason why 5th form isn't outright broken is because it only lasts for 1 turn, so you have to choose wisely when you want your sushi to go Ultra Instinct. Speaking of her S2, it grants Lin Invul Pierce and increases her buster performance by 50% for 1 turn on a 7 to 5 turn cooldown. Nothing really much to analyze about this one. It's her Mana Burst skill that also gives her Invul Pierce because her Empyrean Eye is basically hacks. Her S3 gives her Invul for 1 turn, increases her star gen by 10 to 30% for 3 turns, and removes her own debuffs on an 8 to 6 turn cooldown. This is her survival skill that also has a self debuff cleanse with it, which is very nice, so naturally it's quite useful during those sushi solos that you might have tried with those swordsman duels back during Shimosa, though you may run into the problem of having to use this skill for only one of its effects, but not the other. The star gen buff is actually fairly significant in Tsubaki's case, thanks to her S1, because the increased star gen that she gets from it stacks with the star gen buff on her S3, turning her into that emergency star gen that I mentioned earlier. It's because of this interaction between these two skills that her star gen buff is the only buff in her kit that lasts for 3 turns, because once you use her S3, you have a 3-turn window to use her S1 and put her boosted star gen to use if star gen is what you feel like she needs to set her up for a following turn. Her only passive is Magic Resist A, which gives her 20% debuff resist, a 1 in 5 chance that she'll be able to nope any debuffs coming her way, and it's actually quite nice because if you're lucky, you don't need to feel as pressured to use her S3 just for the debuff cleanse. Rule 63 Jubei's NP is a single target buster NP that first increases its own MP damage by 20 to 60% as it's overcharged, and then removes its target's buffs after dealing damage. It's unfortunate that Sushi doesn't have the Abby or the Amakasa effect of removing buffs before the damage, and so she's more like Banana in this sense. Still, being able to get rid of an enemy's buffs is great for soloing, and even in a team setting, she can provide an actual bit of utility that isn't just beating people over the head with a katana. Baiken is very clearly designed to be a primary DPS saber, and with a kit that's mostly made up of 1-turn buffs, by extension, she's also a burst damage saber, as I described her being in the beginning of this video. But she's not as brainless to use as you might think just because she looks like the perfect buster meme. Because of her S1, its lack of compatibility with her MP, and its possible interaction with her S3, there is some depth to her otherwise unga gameplay in that you need to be mindful of whether or not you want to optimize her MP damage output or her Brave Chain efficiency. In a team battle, which is how you'll be using her most of the time anyway, you can afford to not have to be so optimal since Sushi can can always just rely on her teammates for more buffs during times when she can't min-max her own kit. This isn't quite the case when you're soloing with her, since solos present a different kind of gameplay in FGO, and Yasuko is designed to be a servant who's quite suited for solo fights both in gameplay and in lore, so that kind of makes sense. Not saying that you have to do solos with her, otherwise you fucking suck at this game and Honaka's gonna disown you, but if you want to give yourself a challenge of sorts and play FGO in a different way, then learning how gender-bent Keanu Reeves plays and how her skills work and affect her gameplay is quite important. Which leads us to the elephant in the room, and that is the Overkill Bug. Some of you may have heard of this as the quote Musashi bug, which is why I'm discussing it here in Sushi's how-to video. This bug essentially creates situations where, under the right circumstances, servants can generate much more MP charge than the game probably intends for them to get. How it works is like this. The overkill and overgauge mechanics in FGO allow servants to generate additional stars and MP charge, more so than their regular attacks that hit without them. Specifically, overkill hits have 50% more MP gen and 30% more star gen, so intentionally overkilling an enemy in order to charge up its servant's MP or to get more stars out of them can be very useful. Normally, you should only get these bonuses once you actually trigger the overkill or overgauge states, but there's a bug with the game's spaghetti code that makes it so that you don't actually need to physically trigger overkill in order to get these bonuses. All you need to do is get an enemy's HP down to half of what it was on that turn, and starting with the hit that drops their HP below half is when your servant starts receiving those bonuses. For a more technical explanation of how this happens, please watch the Overkill Bug segment in my FGO Hidden Mechanics video starting at the 14:26 mark. Since this is a universal bug, this applies to any servant, not just sashimi, and it's the reason why arts looping and Scotty looping even exists in the first place. The reason why it's called the quote Musashi bug by some people is because it was initially discovered by someone playing around with Felicia's first skill and then noticing that the amount of MP charge that she was generating with it seemed to be way higher than it should have been. But more relevantly, what this means as far as Jessie's gameplay is concerned is that all of these effects stack. Her S1's double hit count effect, the overkill mechanics, and the overkill bug itself. So under the right circumstances, it is criminally easy for her to go from 0 to 100 real quick, or if you want to squeeze out a bit more damage out of her MP, hit 200% overcharge with an Arts Anchor crit. And given that you oftentimes have side mobs that you can beat up for some extra MP gen or star gen, and bosses have break bars a lot of the time now, unless your name's Ivan, this kind of situation where it's possible to supercharge Sushi's MP may happen a lot more often than you think, so keep an eye out for whenever you take her along into a fight and capitalize on those kinds of situations if you want to. Since Sendai's been isekai'd into FGO, she doesn't have Jinsu or Naka around to keep her from going full Yasen, so make sure that she's properly backed up with teammates who can heal and provide more sustainable damage buffs, since those are really the two things that she needs the most. You can give her star gen support so that she hits even harder, but it's not necessary since her kit doesn't build her into a crit saber role. Focus on providing her attack and buster buffs, but mainly attack buffs. That's the only damage type that she's missing from her own kit, and luckily attack buffs are fairly common, so Ochako isn't really picky with who you give her. Hololive Reject is a particularly good buffer with their double charisma for waifus, and a defense debuff for Sushi to take advantage of, and Bikini Padoru is a good plug suit support with her own third skill that even has a 3-turn guts on it, which is also something that Sushi doesn't have. You could also give her 2080 Ti Simulator as support, and he'd do well at it, but just make sure that Sushi isn't doing anything funny with him behind your back. Another friendly reminder here, but if you're gonna use Cocksucker as Sushi's main support, since I know y'all are gonna use him anyway, just make sure that you don't accidentally use both Merlin's Illusion and Sashimi's third skill on the same turn, because invul effects don't stack, and you're gonna feel real dumb for even trying. As for CEs, Claris, being a Buster meme DPS, has quite a few that she can use. Golden Sumo gives her that missing attack buff that she needs if her team somehow can't provide it for her, or if she's going solo, or any Buster-based CE like Aerial Drive, Partake, First Sunrise, Elzia, or Sea of Stars, the list goes on. but mainly you're looking to put damage Cs on her since that's what she's kinda meant to do, in case her full Circ deck didn't make that obvious enough already. Mutsu's own Bond CE gives her a permanent 30% MP damage buff and a 3-time debuff immunity. The CE is actually not bad if you intend to solo with her in fights that have enemies that like to debuff you a lot, so paired with her S3, Sushi can shrug off quite a few debuffs before they start becoming a serious problem. Outside of solos like that though, and you're certainly going to be feeling the lack of stats, that's a problem among all Bond Z's in this game. In summary, Adult Shimakaze is a burst DPS saber who can smack the shit out of people with Buster Brave Chains for days, and has a powerful gimmick in her first skill that lets her break the game basically for one turn because doubling your own hit counts is one hell of a drug. Make sure to not let Nagato get near of any of the boys like Hans Volter, Billy Harrington, Kittyland, or Captain Nemo, and take her out to eat some udon at Hanamaru or someplace, or some sushi or sashimi, whichever she prefers. And that's all you need to know about Samurai Showdown Simulator. I'll try to make a how-to every week like this until the whole corona shit blows over, and who knows how long that'll take, but no promises. Next video is on FGO's Resident Rush B Simulator, Anastasia. Thanks for watching, and until next time, deuces.